From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this first weekend of June. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. A mammoth of a find.
I had just bought this 40-acre chunk, and somebody asked the neighbor what he thought about it, and he says, well, at least you didn't find an oil well.
Farm Journal digs up the details of a farmer's rare find that's a prehistoric marvel. A dramatic change in drought.
This amount of consecutive days of rain, it's been years since I probably experienced it.
Why Texas farmers are dealing with some tough decisions after weather extremes. Commodity prices took a hard fall to start the week.
It was macro madness to start the week.
Our analysts weigh in on why. And in John's world,
predictions about AI predictions.
The yeas are 63, the nays are 36. The 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill is passed.
the threat of the U.S. potentially facing its first ever default is gone. The Senate approved a bill that raises the nation's debt limit. The deal struck by President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy would reduce budget deficits by $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. A deal on the debt ceiling is important for the entire ag industry to avoid a default of the government and possible shutdown of essential agency services.
The worst thing for rural America today is any default whatsoever, because it's going to drive up the cost of capital. It's going to drive up lending rates. It'll have a real negative impact, especially when you consider the fact that a large amount of capital that goes out to rural America has a connection to government.
The grain market saw a rough sell-off this week with soybean contracts hitting 2 to 3 year lows. And while that was relatively short-lived before weather talk entered the markets, talk of another interest rate hike may be to blame for the drop in prices. Commodity fund traders were worried about persisting inflation and a possible increase in interest rates at the next Fed meeting later this month. Fed fund futures are indicating another 25 basis point hike, but Ag Resource Management telling U.S. Farm Report there's no crystal ball to know exactly what interest rates will do over the next 12 to 18 months. But so far, there's been a 500 basis point rise in interest rates. And for farmers, that means prime rates jumped from 3.25% for the last decade to 8.25% today.
What we know is that their interest cost is going to double year over year. That can put significant pressure on an operation. When we look at, and what a farmer needs to be looking at is what that interest cost is for their operation versus what their gross income is. And really, they've been able to kind of build debt and not have to worry about that. And that may come back to hurt them a little bit at the end of the year.
He points out agriculture goes through various cycles, and he thinks we're potentially entering into one of those cycles now. After a string of warm, sunny days, no doubt many farmers spent a lot of time wrapping up or catching up on planting. Looking at the latest crop progress report, we're just about there for corn, and North Dakota farmers feeling pressure last week made rapid progress, seeing a 32 percentage point jump in a week, with now 72% of that crop planted. As for soybeans nationwide, 83% is in the ground. That's a whopping 18% of normal. Cotton planting, that is still running behind, now at 60%. But spring wheat planting has now almost caught up. It's 85% complete. It's been a remarkable recovery in drought for areas of Texas and the plains. But for parts of the Midwest, it's been dry and only getting drier. But east of the Mississippi, short-term dryness is now starting to expand. USDA shows 34% of the U.S. corn crop is in drought and 28% of soybeans. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says with a high-pressure block in place over the Midwest and up into eastern Canada, it's keeping the moisture west of the Mississippi, a trend expected to continue for at least the next 7 to 10 days. But that atmospheric block is also fueling heavy rains in the southern plains, helping eat away at drought and also prevent plant concerns.
Some areas in the High Plains region from southwestern Nebraska to Texas picked up more than 10 inches of rain. A few locations, it was the wettest May or the wettest month on record. So here we go from these D3s and D4s, extreme to exceptional drought, to flash flooding and planting delays, all in a period of 3 to 4 weeks. Truly remarkable change.
From drought to suddenly too much rain. The Texas Panhandle seen flash flooding this past week. According to the National Weather Service in Amarillo, Hereford, Texas, as of Tuesday, had received 8 inches of rain in the past month, but more rain fell since then, and the heavy rainfall event came last Friday morning, where nearly 2.45 inches of rain fell in just 40 minutes. With such a flat topography and in sort of a valley, that water simply had nowhere to go. The area is home to several feed yards. Some rumored estimates claim 25,000 head of cattle were lost in the flooding, but National Cattlemen's Beef Association telling me those estimates are way too high.
It's one of the largest cattle feeding areas in the United States, so definitely widespread impacts. There's probably going to be some production losses, performance losses in terms of, rate of gain, things like that. None of this stuff is going to be long term. It's mostly going to work its way out here in the next few days. There shouldn't be supply chain increases. There shouldn't be significant price increases. Who knows what else might happen in the meantime, but the impacts are going to be relatively short-lived for the vast majority of these areas.
Now, more flooding happened later in the week as more rain fell. Robinson says that feed yards around Hereford were getting creative and pumping water out and getting cattle on dry ground. One feed yard in particular used dewatering pumps from oil drilling sites, bringing those pumps in from as far as New Mexico. That's it for the news. Well, dry conditions continue to expand across parts of the Midwest. So is some relief on the way, or could those dry conditions continue? We'll have a check of weather next.